Joining me now is the host of this program and NBC News chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell, who's at the annual Aspen Security Forum, and New York Times chief White House correspondent Peter Baker. Andrea, I know you were watching. I had Congressman Mike Turner on a moment ago, and he doesn't believe that the U.S. positioning toward Ukraine will change under a President Trump with a Vice President J.D. Vance.
Well, that is not what most NATO leaders believe, and that's not what Ukraine fears. There was already a heightened concern at the NATO summit that I was covering last week that this would, if former President Trump is elected again, this would create complications, more pressure for negotiation, for concessions from President Zelensky. But they at least had hoped that Marco Rubio, for instance, who is the ranking member from the Republican Party on the Senate Intelligence Committee and has a lot of experience in foreign policy, would have been the choice. But of all the possible choices, the least experienced in both government and foreign policy is J.D. Vance. Not only inexperienced, but he's an isolationist, and he was one of the key votes in the Senate against the supplemental for Ukraine, going up against Mitch McConnell and called out by the Republican leader of his own party for being, one of the opponents of Ukraine aid. So he's taken a more strident position, actually, than Donald Trump. Donald Trump worked with Lindsey Graham, and they came up with a plan. There was delay, and that was, very damaging to Ukraine's efforts during the 6-month period. They had to retreat. They lost Avika. They lost other villages in that northern region. But in any case, they came up with a plan to use the assets, the interest from Russian debt, the frozen debt, $50 billion for reconstruction. They used other money and came up with a forgivable loan plan. So Donald Trump bought into that. J.D. Vance did not.
One of the questions I asked was, does Donald Trump actually support Ukraine? Because his public positioning has leaned more toward Russia, as we've all seen. Congressman
Exactly.
Turner used that opportunity to talk about Donald Trump sending more lethal weaponry to Ukraine. But Peter Baker, I just wanted you to give me some context and just a reality check of what has happened since then. And this is the United States Congress trying to allocate more money to fund Ukraine, but it being held up in the House by MAGA Republicans who didn't believe that the U.S. should be getting involved in it, or who might have been a little bit more sympathetic to Russia, to Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, to say that there's not a different approach to Russia and Ukraine by this Republican ticket is to ignore history, right? Yes, it is true that President Trump sent Javelin missiles to Ukraine and President Obama had failed and refused to do so. Absolutely true. What they don't say is those Javelin missiles were locked in storage containers in Western Ukraine and not allowed to be used. So let's not give too much credit for that. They didn't actually make a difference in the battlefield one way or the other. And remember, of course, the thing he got impeached for, President Trump at the time, was for holding back aid to Ukraine because he wanted to leverage that aid for his own political benefit to get Ukraine to announce some sort of an investigation into his possible challenger, Joe Biden, and his son, Hunter Biden. So there's that to remember. There's also, of course, J.D. Vance's own comment when he ran for Senate 2 years ago. I don't really care about Ukraine, he said. I don't think there's any reason to believe that suddenly changed. And you're absolutely right that former President Trump's relationship with Vladimir Putin remains one of the strongest, as he himself has put it, that he had. He's much closer to Vladimir Putin, than he is to Volodymyr Zelensky, no question about it. He called the invasion, he called Putin a genius at the time of the invasion, the full-scale invasion in 2022. So there's no reason to think that somehow a new administration is going to be as supportive of Ukraine as the outgoing administration, even though a number of Republicans in Congress wish it were, because a number of Republicans in Congress are still very strongly in favor of helping Ukraine.
Andrew, let's turn to the Middle East. You're reporting that the CIA director is not going to make another trip. What's going on there?
Yeah, he's not going right now, which tells me that it's not close to a deal that they had said, and the president said last week and the week before, that there was significant progress towards closing a deal on a ceasefire, a 6-week ceasefire, release of the women, the injured, the elderly hostages in a first phase, and then bridging it to a second phase, prolonging the ceasefire, hoping to make it permanent, that Hamas had agreed finally in recent days that that permanent ceasefire didn't have to be up front. Since then, there have been some obstacles. Netanyahu has again signaled some ambiguity, some ambivalence about it. He's coming next week. Monday, he's supposed to meet with the president. Wednesday next week, he's giving a speech to a joint meeting of Congress. And that, as you know, a number of years ago under President Obama, Vice President Biden was significantly an irritant in the relationship because it was hostile to the policy of negotiating a nuclear deal with Iran, and contrary to White House policy and not by the invitation of the White House. Netanyahu will finally get that meeting with the president that he has wanted since his election, which was denied to him and which was really another significant level of friction there. So they've kind of patched it up. Secretary Austin talked to the defense minister, Gallant, just last night, overnight, about what's happening in the north with Hezbollah. And the CIA director was quoted, and I'm told accurately, from an off-the-record in Sun Valley last weekend saying that Sinwar, the Hamas leader, is under significant pressure in Gaza, partly because of Israel, partly because of Palestinian anger at him, as he is hiding underground and not suffering the losses that the average Gazans are. And that's something that we had already reported. So that is an intelligence assessment. But they are no nearer to getting him. And they say that they may have gotten Mohammed Deif, the second in command, but that has not been established yet.
That's really very interesting reporting regarding Sinwar. Andrea Mitchell, Peter Baker, thank you guys very much.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.